In today's video, we have some more NHL free agent signings to report, and there is plenty of rumors to discuss around a lot of the unsigned players. There's still some big names out there, and we're going to discuss where they may end up, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, we have some more signings to report here, and there's still lots of unsigned players to discuss here, and there's plenty of rumors floating around as to where some of these guys may end up. Now, there's not rumors on all the unsigned players, so we'll discuss what we know, and we'll discuss some of the players here who are currently looking for work, and just give you my thoughts on where some of them may end up going here. As far as the confirmed signings go, obviously Jumbo Joe Thornton has re-signed with the San Jose Sharks on a one-year deal worth $5 million. Obviously, as we talked about and speculated before, the Sharks were kind of waiting and kind of in a holding pattern with Thornton, waiting to see what happened with John Tavares as they were in heavily trying to get him signed. I really think Joe Thornton was going to re-sign with the Sharks no matter what, but the amount and what they could offer him was going to depend on whether or not they landed John Tavares or not. So obviously, we all knew he would end up taking a bit of a pay cut from what he earned last year, which is the case here. So he's down to one-year deal, $5 million. So hopefully Joe can stay healthy here and help the Sharks kind of get back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Getting back to the Stanley Cup Finals is ultimately what their goal is here this season, and I'm sure they have some other moves that they're trying to make here in order to kind of make that happen. Obviously, they weren't successful in landing Tavares, but I don't think the Sharks are done. I do think they're still trying to add, so we'll see what else they do. Now, a lot of the other additions may have to come via trade if they're still looking to inquire about that, because most of the top name free agents, offensively at least, are off the market now. The Sharks also did re-sign Thomas Hertl as well to a 4-year contract worth $5.6 million per season. So obviously Hertl's been there for a while now. You can pretty well consider Thomas Hertl a pretty consistent 20 goal scorer. A couple of years ago he didn't hit 20, but he did miss a big chunk of the year due to injury, so he was on pace for that. So obviously Thomas Hertl plays a fairly big role for the Sharks, and he'll be in the fold for at least 4 more seasons. So pretty decent signing for the Sharks on both fronts there. The Boston Bruins have re-signed forward Sean Kuraly as well. He also gets a 3-year deal. Kuraly's contract comes in a value of $1.275 million. Kuraly played a fairly significant role for the Bruins in the bottom 6 here last year, so obviously it's important to keep him around. We've already seen some of their other bottom 6 guys depart, like Schaller and Riley Nash, so they obviously opted to keep Kuraly around here on a 3-year deal. The Anaheim Ducks have signed former Penguin Carter Rowney as well. Obviously, Rowney can play center and he plays wing as well, depending on what the opportunity is here. With the Ducks signing Carter Rowney, I can't help but wonder if maybe they're not going to bother bringing back Derek Grant. I thought Derek Grant played a pretty good 4th-line center role for the Ducks, got into a fair bit of games last season. I thought he was okay. I thought he might actually finally stick in the NHL, but I kind of question now whether or not they bring him back. Considering they bring in Carter Rowney, who would basically play a similar role for a similar type contract. So I'm not sure if Grant will be returning to the Ducks, but Carter Rowney is now a member of the Ducks on a 3-year contract with just a little bit over $1 million per season. So as I mentioned, there's still some pretty significant players on the market right now. Lots of rumors are swirling around where some of these guys might go. They're weighing out their options. There's different teams negotiating, etc. So let's take a look here at the list of some of the more significant names that are still out there on the free agent market and discuss what we've heard as far as where they may end up. Let's start with defenseman Calvin DeHaan. Obviously, he's probably the top defenseman that's currently available right now on the free agent market. It is being reported that he is still being considered to go back to the New York Islanders. That is a possibility. The Toronto Maple Leafs have been reported as being interested in DeHaan as well, and apparently is some other teams in the mix. The Isles and the Leafs are the main 2 that have been discussed publicly here, so we'll see what happens. Obviously, Calvin DeHaan had a down year last year due to injuries. He was out for a significant period of time, so obviously, he's looking to rebound. I'm sure he wants some term. That might be kind of the sticking point. Some of these teams might not want to give him too long of a term coming off a fairly serious injury, but we'll see. I think he could certainly be a great addition, probably play a second pair D role on a lot of teams here, so we'll see what happens with DeHaan, but right now it's looking like he either returns to the Islanders, possibly goes to the Leafs, or some of the other teams that are out there. They're the only 2, like I said, that are kind of known to be negotiating with him right now as of this moment. There's also winger Patrick Maroon. Now, Maroon's an interesting player to watch as well. He apparently is getting a fair bit of interest. but you can't help but wonder kind of what's taking so long. Some of the teams that were originally mentioned as being interested in negotiating with Maroon have since made other deals. Like for example, with Patrick Maroon, it is being reported he could possibly still end up staying in New Jersey. He could go back to Edmonton. Now, neither of those teams have done a whole lot else with their signings and roster moves, so it is possible that those options could be open here. It was being reported at one point that the Calgary Flames were heavily interested, but they've since signed James Neal, so I assume they're out now on Maroon. I don't think they'd bring in Neal and Maroon both, but never know, but I don't see it happening. Another team that was mentioned to be in on Patrick Maroon was the St. Louis Blues. Now, he's originally from St. Louis. Would have been nice for him to go home and play for his hometown team. But now they made that trade bringing in Ryan O'Reilly. So maybe they're going to, I mean, obviously O'Reilly's a center, Maroon's a winger, so maybe that still happens. But they also signed David Perron in St. Louis as well. Can't help but wonder if maybe the Blues might be out on Maroon as well. So a couple of the doors seem to be closing here on Patrick Maroon. So I'm not really sure where he's going to end up. I would still, right now, I'd say there's a pretty decent chance he possibly goes back to Edmonton. Wouldn't shock me as well if he wound back up in New Jersey. He did seem to be a good fit there after going at the trade deadline. So we'll see what happens here. But Patrick Maroon, one of the better wingers certainly available on the free agent market here still. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. And we keep hearing that there should be an announcement here just about any time, but as of the recording of this video, we're still unclear where he's going to sign. There's also goaltender Robin Lehner. Robin Lehner, I think you could argue, is probably the best goalie still out there that's unsigned. The main team that he's been linked to is the New York Islanders, but they obviously don't have a deal done. I don't know if it's a case of them still negotiating. Maybe it's a case of the Islanders are not as serious on Lehner as we may have originally thought. I mean, once before the Tavares decision came down, obviously it looked as though the Islanders were trying to make some moves to kind of still entice Tavares to return. But obviously that was for naught, and I'm not sure that it was probably too late at that point anyways, to be honest. He left money on the table to go to Toronto. So I don't know if them signing Robin Lehner, I don't really see that as having really would have made much of a difference here at all. I mean, if they would have brought in an all-star goaltender, then maybe, but Robin Lehner is far from that. He struggled to get his NHL career to the point where he's a consistent starter and you know, a regular everyday goalie. I mean, he's played well at times, but he's also been pretty poor at times. But amongst the goalies that are out there, he's certainly the best one. But a lot of other teams that have had goaltending needs have kind of already wrapped up what they're looking for and signed somebody to take that role. So the Islanders are the main team that's left. So could we see Robin Lehner go to the Islanders? I still think it's quite possible, mainly due to the fact that they need somebody and he needs a team and there's just not much else out there. So I still think there's a pretty decent chance that happens. Maybe it's just a case of them taking longer to negotiate the terms here. So we'll see. I mean, I know the Islanders are also looking at maybe acquiring a goalie by trade, and that might be slowing things down as well. So obviously, there's still some fairly big names out there, as we know, that have been rumored to be possibly being traded, and the Islanders might be in on those and maybe looking to acquire a goaltender that way as well. So we'll see what happens with the Isles, but obviously Robin Lehner, a pretty significant name on the market, still looking to sign a contract. Now, the other name that we've heard a lot of speculation about is Anthony Duclair. Now, the Duke has been rumored to be talking to the Montreal Canadiens, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are the main two. There is reportedly a third team. I don't have confirmation on who that is. I have seen some people say maybe Buffalo, which might kind of make sense because obviously they're a younger team looking for, you know, that type of player. So maybe, but obviously they do have a fair bit of guys in their system already. Hard to say, but Buffalo, you know, it's a possibility. But Pittsburgh as a depth winger, or maybe to go back to Montreal, which is a team we did mention before. Obviously, going to Montreal would reunite him with Ty Domi. Obviously, at some points in their careers, between the World Juniors and their time in Arizona, they have had good chemistry before. So could they reunite in Montreal? It does appear to be a possibility. I'm not really sure exactly where things are at with all the negotiations and everything, what's being offered. But it looks as though the Penguins and the Habs seem to be the front runners on Anthony Duclair. Now, there's plenty of other names out there looking for work, names that we're all familiar with, names that we all kind of thought would likely have some type of contract in place by now. But obviously, as we know, a lot happens between July 1st and July 2nd. Usually over the coming days after that, you do see a kind of like a trickle effect where you do get some more signings, but they tend to get less and less significant for the most part. Outside of Robin Lehner, the two main goaltenders out there right now that would have experience that might draw some attention would be Steve Mason and Kari Lehtinen. Obviously, both those guys are looking for work right now. Mason, formerly of the Jets, traded to the Habs and then bought out, so he's available. Lehtinen's been with the Stars for a long time, but obviously they've moved on. You know, is it possible that either of these guys could not get contracts? It certainly is. I mean, like I said, outside of the Islanders, there's really not a whole lot out there looking for NHL goaltenders right now. I mean, I guess it's possible if they wanted to play in the American Hockey League that they might get signed on as a third or fourth string guy in some organizations with an opportunity to come up due to injuries or something. But those are the two other main guys that I would suspect to hopefully, I'm sure, are looking at least for opportunities. But obviously at the same time, they haven't had the greatest track record, so you just never know. Maybe their time in the NHL might be coming to an end here. I mean, Kerry Lettman's a little bit older, so wouldn't be as much of a surprise for him, but Mason's still young enough that somebody might give him a chance. But those are the two main goalie names out there unsigned outside of Robin Lehner. If you're looking for a veteran defenseman, there's plenty of those guys out on the market as well. I mean, you've got Toby Enstrom, formerly of the Winnipeg Jets, who's had a pretty decent career, mostly all his entire career has been with the Atlanta/Winnipeg organization, so he's been a good soldier for them for a long time. But they have to move on due to salary cap constraints. I mean, you've got guys like Paul Martin, you've got Dan Hanhughes out there, you got Josh Georges. These guys could play like a 6th, 7th, 8th role. You know, like could be in and out of the lineup type of player due to injuries or whatnot. May not have a regular shift per se. Outside of those guys, you've also got guys like Alexei Yamelin and Kevin Bieksa too. I mean, they're still looking for work as well. So hard to say what happens with some of these guys. Now, with Bieksa, there was some mention. I'm not sure if it was really a rumor per se. More so Canucks fans kind of saying they wouldn't mind seeing him come home for one final season if he wanted to kind of do a one-year deal with everything they're at with their organization. That might make sense that they could look to do that, like a short-term one-year deal, maybe $1 million contract, something along those lines. But obviously, as we know, Jim Benning's been pretty generous lately with depth players. He's got a pretty expensive fourth line, so maybe he'll bring back Bieksa, who knows. But outside of that, I haven't really heard anything on any of these guys, which at the same time is a surprise, and at the same time it's not, because the game is changing, and these aren't your typical type of players anymore. They're aging, and they don't really necessarily fit with the today's game per se, so they're having a harder time getting work. Another defenseman too that I didn't mention was Brooks Orpik. Obviously, Orpik was recently traded from the Caps to the Avs, so he could be bought out. It was speculated maybe he'd return to Washington, but doesn't seem to be anything to that, at least at this point in time. He's still looking for a contract as well, so you can lump Orpik in with those guys as well. Now, within the forward group, there's still a handful of other guys outside of the ones that we mentioned. Obviously, there's Tyler Ennis recently from the Minnesota Wild, who is looking for work now, but he's been, had some injury problems and been very inconsistent at times. But early in his career, he looked great and was a pretty solid player there for a few years in Buffalo. You got some younger guys too that are still young enough that might be given a chance, like a Thomas Jurko, for example. I mean, he's kind of bounced around a little bit. I know I've seen Jurko play a lot in junior. I really thought he would have kind of been a more established NHLer by this point in his career, but it looks as though he's having a hard time finding work. And then you got some veterans out there. You got like a Benoit Pouliot, you got a Mark Letteste too, Matt Stajan and a Shane Prince. They're all looking for work too. I mean, Shane Prince is still fairly young. He was a former second-round pick of the Ottawa Senators, traded to the Islanders. Islanders decided not to qualify him, and now he's looking for work as well. And he's still young enough that maybe with the right opportunity he could still develop into something. But time is running out on a lot of these guys. It's debatable if a lot of those guys that we just mentioned even get contracts. Some of these guys might end up just going to camp on invitations for a possibility of a spot if they play well during camp. So we'll see. Leave some comments down below, especially on the players that are still looking for work, that are speculated to be looking at certain teams. I'm talking about guys like your Patrick Maroon, your Robin Lehner, Anthony Duclair, etc. Where do you think these guys are going to end up? I do fully suspect that a few of these guys do get NHL jobs. And like I said, a lot of these other guys may be having some tough luck and may have to go to training camp on an invitation. And that might be about it. Some of these guys might be hitting the end of the road here and either go to the American Hockey League, perhaps on a two-way contract, or maybe we'll see some of these guys go over to Europe or the KHL or find work in other leagues, or some of them may just come to an end and completely retire altogether, because some of them are a little bit older and maybe at the end of the road here for their NHL careers. So if you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit that like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.